Story 1. I was never the type to scare easy. I worked patrol in rural Indiana for 8 years before moving to the county's investigations unit, and by then, I'd seen more dead bodies than I could count. Overdoses in trailers, a guy who hung himself in a barn, a grandma who died alone in a recliner and wasn't found until her face stuck to the fabric. Stuff like that gets you used to smells and sights you'd think would ruin you. But this one thing, I can't shake it even now. It was the middle of March, gray rain outside, that cold damp that crawls into your bones even with the heater on in the squad car. I was on with my partner Eric, working a welfare check for an old farmhouse on the edge of town. Dispatch said the neighbor hadn't seen the homeowner, some guy named Curtis, for about 2 weeks, and the mail was spilling out of the box. We get calls like that all the time, and most days it's nothing. But when we pulled up, I just remember feeling like the air was wrong, like the world was holding its breath. Eric knocked first, yelling, "Sheriff's office!" The place smelled like wet leaves and old mold, and the curtains were drawn tight. I peeked through a crack and saw a dark living room, piles of newspapers and an old tube TV still flickering with static. No movement. We circled around the back, found the door unlocked, and announced ourselves again before stepping in. I'll never forget the way it smelled in there. It wasn't the strong, sour death smell you get when someone's decomposed, but it was stale, thick, like wet dirt. The power was still on, but the only light came from that damn TV flashing in the gloom. We split up, me taking the hall, Eric checking the kitchen. "Curtis," I called out. "Sheriff's office, you okay?" Nothing, just the low hum of the TV. I found the bedroom door closed, and I could see the shadow of something low, like a pile of clothes on the floor. I pushed the door, and it creaked slow. The smell was stronger there, like wet wood and something I couldn't place, like old pennies. Curtis wasn't there. The bed was unmade, clothes scattered, and on the floor I saw what looked like a pile of children's drawings. They were wet, smeared with something brownish, stuck together like they'd been dropped in water. I bent down with my flashlight, flipping through them. They were all the same. A figure with no face, scribbled in thick black crayon, standing in a corner of a room. "Eric, you seeing this?" I called. He stepped in, looked at the drawings, then at me, and shrugged. Creepy, but maybe the guy had a kid or something. There were no toys, no kids' clothes, nothing to show a child had lived there. Just those drawings, all of them showing that same figure in the corner. We searched the rest of the house, careful, methodical. Nothing. No Curtis. No signs of struggle. No signs he'd packed up and left. It was like he'd just disappeared. We radioed for a detective to follow up, and I was about to head back to the car when Eric called me from the basement door. "You smell that?" he said. The basement door was open just a crack, but the smell coming out was different. Not rot, but wet soil, mildew, and something sour. We looked at each other, then went down. The basement was low-ceilinged, concrete floor, with old shelves and boxes stacked against the walls. My flashlight caught old tools, cans, a rocking horse that was broken in half and covered in cobwebs. In the middle of the room was a patch of dirt, like someone had dug into the concrete and filled it with soil again. It was wet, dark, and fresh enough that the dirt clung to our boots when we stepped closer. Eric crouched down, poking at the dirt with his flashlight handle. "Why dig a hole in your basement?" he muttered. I didn't answer. I was looking at the walls around us, which were covered with more of those childlike drawings taped up in crooked lines. All of them had the same figure, faceless, standing in the corner. But in these, the figure was closer. Closer until in the last one, it was standing right in front of the person drawing it. I shivered even though the basement was warm. Eric started scraping at the dirt with a small spade we found on a shelf, and after a few minutes, the dirt shifted and collapsed inward. That's when we saw it. A hand, small, pale, like a child, sticking out of the dirt. Fingers curled slightly as if reaching for something. But it wasn't just the hand. It was the size. We uncovered a forearm, then a shoulder, and realized it was a small body. Maybe a toddler. But the report said Curtis lived alone. Eric backed up, breathing heavy, and radioed for the detective and coroner. I stood there staring at that small hand sticking up through the dirt, and I remember I couldn't hear anything. The world went quiet and I just stared, trying to understand what I was looking at. Then I heard it. It was so faint, like a breath, coming from the corner of the basement. I turned, shining my flashlight, and I saw it. I swear to God, I saw it. A figure small, about the size of a child, standing in the corner, facing the wall, shaking slightly like it was trying to turn around but couldn't. It had no face, just a smooth, pale surface where a face should have been, and its arms hung at its sides, twitching. I blinked and it was gone, like it had never been there, but the shape of it burned into my eyes like a camera flash. Eric saw my face. "What? What's wrong?" I just shook my head, trying to clear it, but I couldn't stop shaking. "We need to get out of here," I said, and my voice sounded small. We left the basement, and I stood in the cold rain, trying to catch my breath. They brought in the coroner. Crime scene, all the usual. They found the small skeleton of a child, no clothes, no record of any child ever living with Curtis. When they checked for Curtis, they never found him. The neighbor said he'd seen Curtis talking to someone in the yard a few nights before he vanished, but there was no camera footage. No record, nothing. I don't know if I saw a ghost that day or something else, but I still see that faceless figure when I close my eyes, standing in the corner, shaking, trying to turn around. That was the last welfare check I ever did without backup waiting by the door. I've worked homicide, missing persons, domestic calls, all of it. But nothing has ever rattled me like that basement, like that small hand in the dirt, and the thing in the corner that was waiting for someone to find it. Story 2. I don't usually talk about this call, mostly because I still don't know how to explain it without sounding like I'm making it up. I'm a patrol deputy in Lancaster, Ohio. It's mostly quiet here, farm roads and small neighborhoods. And even when it's not quiet, it's the usual. Domestic disputes, meth calls, welfare checks where you find people passed out in recliners. This was a welfare check too. Middle of December, early morning, right before Christmas. Dispatch said an elderly lady hadn't been seen for days, mail piling up, neighbor concerned. I remember pulling up to the house, frost on the windows, that smell of cold that sticks in your nose. The neighbor was waiting, arms crossed, and said, "I think she's dead in there." That's the kind of thing people say around here, and half the time they're right. I knocked, nothing. Knocked louder, called her name, Mrs. Halperin, still nothing. Legally, I can force entry if I have cause, so I tried the door, and it creaked open, not even locked. It was dark inside, smelled like cat pee and stale air, but nothing unusual for a house where someone might have died alone. I had my flashlight out as I stepped in. "Sheriff's office? Mrs. Halperin?" I said it loud enough to wake anybody if they were there. No answer, just the sound of my boots on the old wooden floor and the faint clicking of the hallway clock. The house was freezing, the heat was off or broken. I passed a little kitchen with dishes stacked, a newspaper from a week ago. Nothing looked disturbed, no sign of a struggle or forced entry. It was just dead quiet, like the house itself was waiting. I pushed open her bedroom door, expecting to find her in bed, but the bed was neatly made, like she hadn't been in it. That's when I noticed the walls. At first, I didn't realize what I was seeing because my flashlight only caught the edges. But when I turned the beam directly, I saw there were papers taped to every inch of the wall, all handwritten in black marker. At first, I couldn't read them. I stepped closer, shining the light across them, and they all said the same thing over and over. "Remember, the voices aren't real." Hundreds of pages lined up, taped with yellowed Scotch tape, crinkled at the edges. Some were written so hard the marker bled through. I felt that small knot in my stomach you get before you find a body, that sense of standing somewhere you shouldn't. I radioed in that the house was clear so far, but I was going to continue the check. The dispatcher just said, "Copy," and I remember thinking how normal her voice sounded while I stood in that room that felt anything but normal. I turned to leave the bedroom, but there was a noise from down the hall, a sharp knocking sound, like someone rapping on a wall with their knuckles. It was 3 knocks, evenly spaced, coming from the hallway closet. I can't explain why, but that was the moment every hair on my neck stood up. "Sheriff's office, If someone's in there, announce yourself, I called out, hand on my holster, thumb brushing the snap. Another 3 knocks, this time a bit louder, like it was insisting I pay attention. I moved toward the closet, opened it fast, flashlight up, ready to draw if I had to. It was empty, just a winter coat, an old vacuum, a box of shoes. Nothing that could knock. I tapped on the wall myself, testing it, but it didn't sound hollow. I stepped back, about to close the door, when I heard a woman's voice behind me, clear as day, say, "They're not real." I spun around so fast my flashlight hit the doorframe, rattling in my hand. No one was there. The hallway was empty, but I could feel it, that cold, pressing feeling, like someone was right there, inches from my face, breathing in that cold, musty air. I backed out of the hallway, flashlight shaking. I tried to radio dispatch again, but my mic was dead, nothing but static. I stepped backward into the living room, trying to get a signal, and I saw something move out of the corner of my eye in the reflection of the dark TV screen. A woman, short, in a nightgown, hair flat and gray, standing just behind me. I turned, ready to grab her if she was there, but there was nothing. The house was empty. My heart was hammering so hard I felt it in my throat. I don't scare easy, but I can tell you I was scared then. The radio crackled to life again, dispatch asking if I was clear. I said, "House is empty, no sign of Mrs. Halpern." My voice sounded wrong in my ears, too loud, too thin. I backed out of that house, didn't even bother locking the door behind me. I told the neighbor she wasn't inside, and we'd file a missing person report. He just nodded, looking past me toward the house like he didn't want to ask what I saw in there. They found her a week later in the woods behind her house, dead from exposure. She had walked out barefoot in the middle of the night, in just a nightgown, during a snowstorm. They said she'd been having episodes, hearing voices, paranoid. I don't know. Maybe she was running from the voices. Maybe she thought she could get away from them in the cold. I still think about that day, about those papers taped to every wall, about those knocks in the closet, about the voice that whispered in that empty hallway. I can't explain it. I've cleared a lot of houses, found people dead, found people hiding, found nothing but empty rooms and bad smells. But that house was different. I don't go near it anymore, even though it's on my patrol route. They boarded it up, eventually tore it down, but when I drive by where it used to be, sometimes I still feel that cold crawl up the back of my neck. And I swear I can almost hear 3 knocks from somewhere I can't see. I tell people the house was empty, that there was nothing to report. That's what I put in the paperwork. But if you're asking me the creepiest thing I've found during a search, it wasn't a body or a person or a meth lab. It was whatever was in that house, knocking from the other side of the wall, waiting for someone to remember that the voices aren't real. Story 3. I was still living in Waco when this happened, working nights with McLennan County, doing the usual wellness checks for folks who hadn't been heard from in a while. The call came in just before dawn, one of those sticky Texas mornings where your shirt glues to your back before you even start your shift. Dispatch said it was a welfare check. Old man hadn't answered calls. Neighbors noticed flies around the windows. That sort of thing. I wasn't in the mood for a dead body that day, but we go, you know? You don't get to skip these calls just because you feel off. The house was a single-story brick, 1970s leftover, lawn dead and patchy, mailbox rusted off its post, porch light still on even though it was getting light outside. I knocked, waited, knocked again, loud, nothing. The front window had those old vertical blinds, and behind them you could see the TV flickering, lighting up the room in weird colors. That was when I smelled it. If you've never smelled a dead body, it's hard to explain. It's sweet, thick, and it feels like it coats your throat. I've smelled it before, but it still makes you want to swallow hard. I radioed in, let dispatch know I was going in, and pushed the door open. It wasn't locked, just swollen in the frame. The smell hit me, stronger inside, mixed with something like burnt plastic. I stepped in slow, hand on my belt, even though I knew no one alive was going to be in there waiting for me. I called out, "McLennan County Sheriff's calling out," like we always do, even if it's clear the only one home isn't going to answer. It was dark, but the TV was on, tuned to some old Western, volume way up. I moved forward, past old newspapers, trash bags, food containers, the usual for a welfare check like this. The living room was at the end of the hall, and that's where I saw him. He was sitting in one of those green plastic lawn chairs, shirt off, pants around his waist. His head was tilted back, eyes open, mouth hanging open like he'd just taken a deep breath and forgot to let it out. The TV was flickering against his face, and I remember it made him look alive for a split second until I saw the dark streaks down his chin. The heater was what got me. He had an industrial space heater set up behind him, big, metal, humming low, blowing hot air right at his back. I don't know how long it had been on, but the smell was worse there, heavier, and I realized it wasn't just decomposition I was smelling. It took me a second to understand what I was looking at. His skin had stuck to the plastic of the chair. Not just stuck, but melted into it, like wax dripping and hardening again. His back had caved in, the skin blackened and fused with the green plastic. And when the air moved, I could hear this faint crackle, like the sound of a plastic bag shifting. But it was him. I tried to step closer, but I gagged, had to turn my head, swallowing it back down because you can't puke in a scene like that if you can help it. I remember I called out again, "Sir, if you can hear me," like an idiot, even though his eyes were glazed over and dry. That's when the TV went black. No click, no pop, no flicker, just off. The room went quiet except for the heater humming. I glanced back, wondering if the power had gone out, but the heater was still on, the little red light glowing. And then the TV came back on, but it wasn't the Western anymore. It was a blue screen, like those old no-signal screens, but darker, deeper blue. In the middle of it was a black circle, flickering, pulsing like it was breathing. I don't know how long I stared at it, but I couldn't move. It felt like the air in the room was pressing down on me, making it hard to breathe, and my eyes started to water. The dead man's head moved. It was slow, like the sound of old leather creaking, and I heard that crackle again, and I swear his head turned just a few inches toward the TV. His mouth moved, jaw twitching, like he was trying to say something, but nothing came out except this faint hiss like air leaking from a tire. I took a step back, and the black circle on the TV started to grow, spreading across the screen, flickering like a shadow underwater. The heater started to buzz, louder, the pitch climbing, and the smell got worse, this burning, rotting stench that made my eyes tear up. Then the TV screen went completely black. The heater shut off at the same moment, just a sudden dead silence that made the ringing in my ears loud. The dead man's head snapped back to its original position, mouth open again, eyes staring forward. I don't remember drawing my gun, but it was in my hand, pointed at the floor, shaking. I backed out of that room, one step at a time, eyes locked on him, waiting for him to move again. He didn't. He just sat there, fused to the chair, mouth open, staring at the blank TV. I called it in, told dispatch we had a confirmed DOA, but I didn't mention the TV. I didn't mention the sound. I didn't mention that I could still hear that hiss, even though everything was quiet. I waited outside for the coroner, sitting on the curb, hands shaking, trying to breathe. It was just after sunrise and the street was quiet, birds chirping, people walking their dogs like nothing had happened. When they came to get the body, I didn't go back in. I couldn't. I stood by the door watching as they struggled to get him off that chair, the plastic tearing and snapping, his skin coming away with it in black, sticky strings. They asked me how long I thought he'd been there, and I just shook my head. I didn't know what to say. They bagged the body, took the chair with him because it was fused to him, and left. Story 4. I used to live in Omaha, worked patrol for about 8 years before moving to property crimes. I'm not some ghost guy, and I don't even like telling this story. But every time someone asks, "What's the creepiest thing you found during a search?" this is all I can think about. We got a call one winter morning, like 5:30 a.m., about a welfare check on an old man who wasn't answering his phone. His daughter in Florida was worried because he hadn't called her back the night before, which was unusual. It was the kind of call you usually expect to end with a welfare check, maybe a natural death, and a report. You knock, call out, find them on the floor, you call it in, you wait for the coroner. That's what you expect. The house was on the south side, older neighborhood, small single-story home with a fenced yard and a detached garage. No lights on inside, but his truck was there. I was with my partner Sam, and we knocked, called out, waited. Nothing. We called the daughter back. She said to go in if we had to. So we got the pry bar from the cruiser and popped the back door. The house was cold inside, smelled like dust and something else, a little sweet. I remember seeing a ceramic angel on a shelf right when I stepped in, the kind with the little eyes looking up at you. We cleared the kitchen, checked the living room, nothing. We called out, "Police! Anybody home?" A few times, but it was dead quiet. We found him in the bedroom. He was sitting up against the headboard, eyes closed, mouth a little open, looking like he fell asleep that way. Skin color told us he was gone. We did the usual, checked for any signs of foul play, looked for medications, all of that. Nothing suspicious, no forced entry, just a sad, normal call. Sam started making phone calls while I walked around to get a better look for his ID, meds, wallet, to write down the prescriptions. The room was tight, smelled stale. I noticed his closet door was slightly open, and I just wanted to make sure nobody was in there. You know, like a burglary gone wrong or something, even if it was unlikely. When I opened that closet, it was packed. Clothes and shoes and boxes, but the smell hit me worse there. Like old sweat and something sharp, like metal. I leaned in to push the clothes aside to look at the floor, and that's when I heard it. It was like a whisper coming from deep in that closet, behind the clothes. It was so faint I thought it was the wind in the vent. Then I heard it again, a little clearer, like someone whispering, "Help me." I froze. I called Sam over, asked if he heard it. He came in annoyed, thinking I was messing with him, but then he stopped and leaned in. We both stood there, silent, listening. I could hear it, clear as day, a man's voice, muffled, like it was behind the wall saying, "Help me, please, help." We thought maybe it was the neighbor's TV, but it was coming from behind the wall, from inside the closet. The hairs on my neck were up, and I felt my stomach drop in a way I can't really explain. We pulled everything out of that closet, looking for a crawl space, a vent, anything. The voice kept coming every few seconds, always the same, always that same "help me." It didn't change, didn't get louder, didn't sound like anyone was banging on a wall or moving. It was like a recording, but there was no speaker, no wires, nothing in that closet except old shoes and boxes of clothes. We tore that closet apart, looking for a panel or loose floorboard, even called for another unit to check the basement in case someone was stuck down there. Nothing. The voice just kept going, steady, same tone, same pause between each "help me." Sam recorded it on his phone, and when we played it back, there was nothing. Just the sound of us moving and breathing, no voice at all. That's when I really felt it, like something heavy was in that room, pressing down on us, on the air. Sam wouldn't admit it, but I saw his hands shaking a little when he stepped back. We had the coroner take the body, filed the report, noted the strange noise, but we didn't really know what else to write. We told the daughter we found him peacefully in bed, didn't mention the voice. I don't know how you explain that to someone. A week later, Sam called me at night, said he kept hearing that voice in his head when he was trying to sleep. Same words, same tone. "Help me, please, help." He said he felt like it was following him home, like when he turned off the lights in his apartment, he could almost hear it in the corner of his room. I didn't tell him I was hearing it too, every time I tried to sleep, especially when I closed my eyes. I could hear it right in my ear, soft, begging, steady. I'd turn on the TV or let the dog in my room just to drown it out. It wasn't every night, but it happened enough. After about a month, it stopped. I don't know why. I didn't go back to that house, and I never talked to the family again. I don't even know if they ever cleaned out that closet or heard anything themselves. Sometimes I think about how we heard it clear as day, how it was coming from right behind those clothes. The old man was dead, But that voice didn't sound like him. It didn't sound like someone alive either. It just sounded like someone stuck somewhere, repeating the same plea forever. I've seen some bad stuff on this job. Traffic accidents, suicides, murders. But nothing has ever stuck with me like that voice in the closet. It wasn't the scariest call I've been on, but it was the one that made me feel the coldest, the most helpless. Because you can't arrest a voice. You can't call backup for something you can't see. That's all I can say about it. I don't tell this story at bars or around the station. Most guys wouldn't believe it anyway, or they'd make jokes. But when you spend years in people's homes, seeing how they live, how they die, you get used to the silence. Story 5. I wasn't supposed to be there that day. I was covering a shift for another guy who called in sick, so I was already running on fumes and bad coffee when we rolled up to that rundown duplex on the west side of Phoenix. My name's Mike. I've been with the department for 8 years, mostly narcotics, but this was a probation compliance search for a registered sex offender who had been flagged for missing meetings. It was around 10:30 in the morning. Already hot. The AC in the unit was busted, so the air smelled like old carpet and mildew when we walked in. The guy, Richard, was in his late 50s, skinny, smelled like sweat and cigarettes. He stood there in the living room, shaking while we told him to sit down. He didn't say much, just kept looking at me, blinking a lot. My partner was talking to him about his probation conditions, and I started the search, moving room to room while he signed the consent papers. Nothing too weird at first. Cheap furniture, sink full of dishes, piles of old mail. I opened a door down the hallway, expecting a laundry room or maybe a junk closet, but it was a bedroom. Pink curtains, a little white dresser with plastic jewels for handles, a bed with a princess comforter, small pink sandals neatly lined up near the door. I froze. It looked exactly like a little girl's room. I mean, perfect, down to the stuffed animals on the pillow and the glitter stickers on the mirror. But this guy didn't have kids. I knew that before we even arrived. "Hey, can you come here?" I called down the hallway, keeping my eyes on the room. My partner stepped in behind me, went real quiet. We didn't say a word for a few seconds, just stood there looking around. There was something about how clean it was that made my skin crawl. Everything else in the house was dirty and cluttered, but this room was spotless, like it was waiting for someone. There was a small closet near the bed, one of those folding doors with the slats. It was closed. I stepped over, reached for the handle, and pulled it open. Inside, standing upright, was a 4-foot doll in a pink dress. Blonde hair, blue glass eyes, tiny white shoes. It looked handmade, the kind you'd see in an old toy store, but bigger, too big, like it wasn't meant to be played with. Just standing there facing out, its eyes catching the hallway light. I remember feeling my stomach drop in a way I can't explain, like I was seeing something I wasn't supposed to see. I backed up, and my partner said, "What the hell, man?" We didn't touch it at first. I radioed for a supervisor, and we kept the guy in cuffs while we waited. He was rocking back and forth on the couch, mumbling, "She's sleeping, she's sleeping." That's when it clicked in my head that he was talking about the doll. When our sergeant showed up, we had to clear the closet for evidence. I put gloves on and reached in, trying not to look at its face. It was heavy, heavier than I expected, and when I shifted it, something inside it moved, like a weight shifting from one side to the other. I set it down in the middle of the pink bed, and its eyes seemed to stare straight at me. I tried to tell myself it was just a trick of the glass, but it felt like it was looking right into me. The mouth was painted in a soft smile, chipped in one corner. The hair was real, or at least felt real, and when I brushed it aside, I saw something stitched into the neck. Tiny letters embroidered into the fabric skin, MELISSA. We checked missing persons, ran the name, nothing. The guy just kept saying, "She's sleeping, don't wake her up," over and over. I pulled down the back of the dress, looking for any ID tag or brand. There was a seam, poorly stitched along the spine. My sergeant gave me a look and nodded. We got a small knife from the kitchen. I cut the seam slowly, trying to keep my hand steady. It wasn't stuffing inside. It was hair, human hair stuffed tight inside the cloth skin. And when I cut deeper, small bones tumbled out onto the bedspread. Finger bones, tiny, like from a child's hand. A smell came out of it that was sweet and rotten at the same time, and I almost dropped the knife. My partner backed up, hand over his mouth, eyes watering. I just kept staring at the doll, unable to process that I was looking at what I was looking at. We ended up tearing it open on the bed. Inside was a small rib cage, matted hair, bits of cloth soaked in something dark and crusted. It wasn't a doll at all. It was a skin stitched around bones, made to look like a doll. The guy started screaming when he heard us in the room, screaming so loud it didn't sound human, fighting against the cuffs, screaming, "She's mine! She's mine! She's mine!" until he collapsed, sobbing into the carpet. I stood in that pink room, breathing hard, trying to process what was in front of me, in a child's bed under pink curtains, and I felt like the world tilted. I don't care how tough you think you are. You don't walk away from something like that the same. I found out later that he had been visiting a flea market every Sunday for years, collecting doll parts, hair clippings, bits of fabric. We never found out whose bones were in that doll. DNA didn't match any missing persons on record. It was like she never existed except in that room. They took him away, screaming, still crying, as they bagged the remains. I remember stepping out into the sunlight, the heat hitting me like a wall, and I wanted to peel my uniform off and burn it. I couldn't get the smell out of my nose for weeks. I still see it sometimes when I close my eyes, that doll sitting in the closet, waiting. The way the eyes caught the light when I opened the door. I don't work compliance checks anymore. I transferred out after that, and I don't go into houses like that alone anymore. You hear a lot of stories in this job, but I'm telling you now, there's stuff out there that's worse than ghosts. Sometimes you find something in a house that changes you, and sometimes you walk into a room that feels like it's waiting for you, and you leave a part of yourself there that you can't ever get back. That day I left something in that pink room, and it's never coming back. Story 6. I'd never really liked the smell of that neighborhood on the east side of town. Old brick homes, cracked sidewalks, and the faint stink of mold that gets into your uniform when you walk through the front door of a place that's been abandoned too long. I've been a patrol officer in Indiana for 8 years now, and I'd seen enough broken windows and overdoses that nothing really rattled me anymore. But that call came in just after 2 a.m., a welfare check. A neighbor said she hadn't seen the old man who lived there for weeks, but she swore she saw someone moving in the upstairs window that night. Dispatch didn't send backup because it was supposed to be routine, and I didn't argue. I parked under a dead streetlight, the house sitting there in the dark like a punched-out tooth in the row of houses. I remember I didn't want to get out of the car. You know that hesitation, the small flicker in your gut telling you something's off before your brain tries to reason it away. I grabbed my flashlight and knocked, but it echoed through the empty place. No movement, no sounds. Door was unlocked. I stepped in, and the air hit me, heavy and sweet. Not death, but like rot that's had time to settle. I called out, "Police, anyone home?" Nothing. I radioed that I was inside, but it crackled out, and I remember thinking, of course, it's tonight the damn radio won't work. The house was cluttered but empty, newspapers stacked, dishes crusted over, and that quiet hum you get when a place is too still. I started upstairs, slow, flashlight bouncing off, peeling wallpaper. The hall was narrow, door on the right closed, door on the left cracked open. That's when I saw it. In the corner of the hallway at the far end, just past the last door, something was standing there. It looked like a person, facing the corner, not moving. My flashlight flickered, and I barked out, "Police, turn around, hands where I can see them." No movement. I tightened my grip on my light and walked forward. I could see it clearer now. A tall shape, shoulders hunched, a black-brimmed hat, and a long dark coat hanging off it. Just standing there. No breathing, no shifting. My brain said it was a coat rack, but it was too tall, too human-shaped, and the hat was tilted too perfect, like someone trying to hide their face against the wall. I don't know why I said it, but I whispered, "Hey buddy, you okay?" I swear to you, I heard breathing. I stepped closer, maybe 4 feet away, trying to convince myself it was a coat rack. Then the air got colder, the kind that bites your skin, and I saw frost blooming on the wooden floor around its feet. My flashlight flickered again, and the light caught on something wet on the brim of the hat, dripping slow like it was crying. I was about to reach out, thinking I had to confirm it was a rack, had to clear the room, had to finish the call. My radio cracked behind me with a burst of static, and I jumped, looking back for half a second. When I turned back, it wasn't in the corner anymore. It was in my face. No footsteps, no sound. Just there. I saw a pale, sagging face, eyes black and sunken, the skin rippling like water. Its breath was ice on my cheek, and it whispered something, but the words were wrong, all backward and slow, like a tape in reverse. I could smell soil, damp, fresh like earth that's been dug up. I stumbled back, nearly falling down the stairs, and the thing didn't move, just stood there watching me, head tilted. Then it took one step, and I felt the wood under my feet vibrate. I screamed, I'm not ashamed to say it, and I ran down those stairs, crashing into the front door so hard I nearly ripped it off the hinges. When I got outside, I turned, and from the window at the top of the stairs, it was there, looking down at me. That hat, that coat, those black holes for eyes. It didn't move, didn't follow, just stood there. Backup arrived 5 minutes later, and I was still in the street, shaking, my flashlight somewhere inside. They thought I'd been attacked, but there was no one in the house. No footprints upstairs, no sign of forced entry, no coat rack, nothing. The neighbor swore she saw someone moving in that upstairs window again the next night. They told me later that the man who lived there, he'd died alone in that house, collapsed in that hallway, body undiscovered for a month before they finally took him out. They buried him in his favorite black coat and hat because he never went anywhere without it. I don't do welfare checks alone anymore. Story 7. I never liked checking welfare calls. I'm a patrol deputy out in southern Illinois, a quiet stretch where the roads cut through cornfields and sagging trailers, the air always heavy even when it's cold. It was late fall when dispatch sent me out to a double wide on the edge of town. Something about no contact in months, a cousin calling from out of state. I pulled up around 9 in the morning. The gravel drive was half washed out, with beer cans scattered under a rusted-out F-150 that hadn't moved in a while. I got that feeling I always get before opening a door that might have a dead guy behind it. My stomach tightening, mouth dry, lungs heavy like I hadn't caught a full breath. I knocked. Sheriff's office! Nothing. The windows were clouded over with grime, curtains drawn. I knocked again, harder. Nothing but the wind rattling the aluminum siding. The cousin on the phone said the guy's name was Carl, retired, drank a lot of Miller Lite, had his bills auto-drafted, no friends, no kids, nothing. I didn't smell anything outside, but the air was cold and I knew that didn't mean much. I popped the screen door and twisted the knob on the main door. Unlocked. Sheriff's office. Carl, you in here? The smell hit as soon as I opened it, like sweet rot and sour beer, a heavy, wet smell that you feel in your nose more than you actually smell. The place was dark, only a little gray light cutting through the kitchen blinds. I stepped inside, careful not to slip on the floor, which was littered with empty beer cans, some crushed, some upright like sad soldiers standing watch. I said again, Carl, sheriff's office, as I stepped around the counter. I pulled my flashlight even though there was enough light to see, just because I wanted something in my hand. The place was silent except for the cans shifting under my boots. The living room was straight ahead. That's when I saw him. He was on the couch, leaned back like he'd just fallen asleep. The first thing I noticed was the skull. It was clean, yellow-white, with wisps of hair still clinging near the ears, mouth open. The eye sockets were empty, dark holes staring at the sagging ceiling. The rest of him was worse. His chest, shoulders, arms, gone, nothing but bones and scraps of dried-out skin like old leather. But below the rib cage, the meat was still there, bloated and blackened, fused to the couch. Dark stains spread around him. One of his feet was swollen, the skin splitting open around the toes. The smell pulsed out in waves now, sweet and rancid, making my eyes water. I turned, nearly gagging, and stepped back. My boot crunched something, and I looked down. Empty Miller Lite cans, hundreds of them, covering the carpet like mulch. Some stacked in pyramids, others just scattered wherever they'd fallen. That was when it hit me how long he'd been there. Alone, dying in that chair while the TV was still on. It was frozen on a shopping channel, some lady selling jewelry to no one. The screen burned in the middle from sitting on pause for months. Dispatch, 1227, I said into my mic, trying to keep my voice steady. Confirm, I've got a 10-7, male, advanced decomp, request coroner. 10-4, 1227, dispatch crackled back. I walked to the kitchen, needing air, needing to get away from him for a second, but the house was so small there was nowhere to go. The fridge was open a crack, buzzing loud, filled with cans and rotting takeout boxes. A magnet held up a photo of Carl from who knows how many years ago. Smiling, holding a fish, some lake behind him. I went back to the living room because I had to check for ID even though we all knew who it was. I stepped around the couch, trying not to look at the leaking black mess underneath him, and reached for the wallet on the coffee table, beside an ashtray overflowing with butts. His ID was there. Carl Sanders, 64 years old. That's when I heard it. Help me. It was so soft I thought it was the TV at first, but it was off now, the screen dark. I froze, looking at Carl's empty eye sockets, the way the jaw was hanging open, teeth yellow and cracked. Help me! It came again, low, wet, like someone trying to speak through water. It came from him. I swear it came from him. I backed up, hitting the wall, flashlight shaking in my hand. The jaw moved, just slightly, a creak of dried-out cartilage or something, but it moved. Help me! My radio crackled again, making me jump. 1227, did you copy? I didn't answer. I was staring at Carl, at the way his mouth had closed now, just slightly, like it was never open at all. The house was dead silent. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears, pounding so hard I thought I'd pass out. The smell pressed down around me, thick, heavy. Help me, it whispered again, so close I felt it against my ear. But I was alone with him and the cans and the rotting air. I ran, I won't lie about it. I ran out of that trailer, boots crunching over the beer cans, out into the cold morning air, where I threw up in the dirt beside my cruiser. I radioed back, hands shaking, told them I needed the coroner and that I'd secure the scene outside. When they came, I didn't go back in. I let the coroner and the other deputy do it, pretending I was busy with paperwork, but I couldn't go back in there. Not after hearing that. They said he'd been dead for about 5 months. The heating was off, so it slowed everything down, let the top dry out while the bottom rotted into the couch. The coroner said it was normal. Just science. Just nature. But I know what I heard. I know what I saw when that jaw moved, and I'll never forget the way that voice sounded, like someone lost, alone in that dark house, waiting for someone to notice he was gone. That's the worst part. He died there, surrounded by empty cans and a paused shopping channel, and no one noticed. And when we finally did, it was too late. All that was left was a whisper in a jaw that moved when it shouldn't have. I still do welfare checks, still knock on doors, still announce myself, still open doors that smell like death. But every time I do, I hear him. Help me. And I know it doesn't matter how fast we get there. Sometimes you're already too late. Story 8, I'm Dave. I work patrol in a mid-sized Midwest city. We get calls for everything, but the ones that stick are always the ones you don't expect to mess you up. I remember it was late fall because the air felt wet, and I was halfway through a double shift when dispatch sent me and my partner Ray to check on a welfare call at this old apartment complex known for meth heads and constant fights. It wasn't even the call that made me feel weird at first. It was how quiet it got as we pulled up. Usually you'd hear yelling, dogs barking, windows slamming, something. But that hallway was dead quiet. We had a female caller say the renter inside had been assaulted and she had fled. That was all we had. No one answered when we knocked. Ray tried the handle. Dead bolted. I tried to force it with my shoulder, but it felt like hitting a brick wall. I ended up kicking that door so many times that my thigh started cramping. Every time I stepped back for another kick, the hallway felt colder. I know that sounds stupid, but that place felt like it was swallowing noise. When the lock finally snapped, the metal deadbolt shot across the room, smacked the wall, and clattered onto the floor. We stepped in, guns up, and the smell hit first. Meth houses have a smell, chemical, rotten, but under that was something thicker, like rust. The inside was pitch black, just a flickering bathroom light down the hall. We started clearing the living room, and I could see weird symbols, swastikas, 666, spray painted on the cracked walls. There were Polaroids of people's faces taped up, eyes scratched out with a knife. Baby dolls too, some hanging from the ceiling with fishing line, their eyes cut into X's. Ray muttered, "What the hell, man?" under his breath. That's when I saw the blood. First, just a spot on the mattress, then smears across the floor leading to the hallway. I remember the way my boots stuck to the floor as I stepped, the tacky sound pulling at the silence. We followed it down to the bathroom, and that's where we saw the dog. It was a skinny pit bull, shaking so bad it was pissing all over the floor, slipping in its own mess. It wasn't growling, just making this low, miserable whine, looking back at the bathroom door, then at us, over and over, like it didn't know what to do. As we got closer, it tried to snap at Ray, more out of fear than aggression, just a terrified, desperate bite. I edged around it, pushed the half-closed bathroom door open with my boot, and that's when I saw him. The renter was hunched in the tub, blood all over his face, hands clutching his cheeks. His eyes were wild, darting back and forth, and he kept trying to talk, but it was just a wet clicking sound. I told him, "Don't move, man. You're okay. We're here." But he shook his head, pointing at the dog, trying to talk again. That's when I saw it. His jaw was hanging, just swinging there, both sides dislocated, turning his mouth into this sideways gaping hole. Every time he tried to talk, his tongue flicked out in these jerky movements, tapping against his teeth, spraying blood. It took me a second to realize he was trying to plead with us not to hurt the dog, even like that, even in that much pain. Ray called for EMS while I tried to keep him calm, but he wouldn't stop trying to talk, mouthing words with nothing working, just this raw, panicked clicking, tongue moving in patterns, blood dripping onto the porcelain. I glanced around the room trying to find something to give him for pressure, and that's when I saw what was behind the shower curtain. It wasn't a body, but it was something I wish I hadn't seen. It was another baby doll, duct taped to the wall, with a Polaroid of the renter's face taped to its chest. The eyes on the photo were X'd out, and the doll's mouth was torn open, pieces of raw meat stuffed inside, with nails driven through the hands into the tile. The renter saw me looking at it, and he started shaking his head, hard, making these muffled whimpers. His tongue flicked faster, like he was trying to say, "No, no, no." I felt like the air in that room was pressing down on me, thick and cold, and for a second I thought I saw the doll's head tilt. Just a tiny shift, like it was looking at me. I know how that sounds, but I swear to God, it moved. The dog started barking then, high-pitched, losing its mind, slipping in the blood on the floor. The renter let out this strangled, wet scream, and Ray was yelling at me to get him out of the tub. But I couldn't move for a second because it felt like something else was in that room, breathing right behind me. It felt like the lights got dimmer, like the shadows in the corners were stretching. Ray pulled me back, snapping me out of it, and we both lifted the renter out of the tub, careful with his jaw, while he kept trying to talk with that clicking, flicking tongue, blood pouring down his neck onto our vests. As we carried him down the hall, past the blood and the dolls, I looked back once just before we got to the door. The bathroom light was still flickering, and for a split second, I saw what looked like a shadow standing in the doorway, tall and thin, head cocked to the side. It wasn't Ray and it wasn't me. And then it was gone. We got the renter out, handed him off to EMS, who were staring at us like we were ghosts ourselves, and we cleared the apartment again. But there was nothing. Just those dolls, those photos, and the smell of blood. I put in for vacation the next day. Couldn't sleep for weeks. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that doll's head tilt. Sometimes I swear I can still hear the renter's tongue clicking, like he's trying to tell me something, but the words won't come out. That was the last time I went into a house like that without backup waiting outside. Story 9. I never thought much about the stuff you find in people's homes until that night in December. I'm a deputy out in a small county near Modesto. Been on the job about 8 years at the time, and I'd seen enough domestic calls to know Christmas Eve is never quiet. People get to drinking, old arguments bubble up. You know the drill. Dispatch sent us to a trailer out past the citrus groves around 9 p.m. Family disturbance. No weapons, verbal only, they said. The place was half falling apart, aluminum siding dented, old holiday lights blinking red and green. I remember the plastic Santa by the door with one eye missing. I was partnered with Travis that night, younger guy, fresh out of field training. We knocked, announced ourselves, and the husband came to the door, shirtless, looking wired. His wife was in the living room pacing, tears dried on her cheeks. No visible injuries, no signs of assault. So we started our routine, separate them, get statements, cool everyone down, file the report, clear the call. It was when I stepped fully into that living room that everything in my gut twisted. Every surface in that place had a knife or a dildo on it. I'm talking hundreds. Some still in packages, others just lying out, lined up like a damn museum display. Kitchen counter, coffee table, couch cushions. Even the top of the TV had a row of those cheap rainbow-colored silicone dildos. Big ones, tiny ones, horse-sized, some that looked handmade with lumps like tumors. A few were sitting under the tree, half-wrapped like stocking stuffers nobody would ever want. Knives were everywhere too. Karambits, throwing knives, cheap mall swords, hunting blades, even a couple machetes. Some looked clean, some had dark smudges like old oil. The husband told me he collected them, said it was for protection, but his eyes were twitchy, and the way the wife kept glancing at the hallway made me uneasy. I tried to keep a straight face, get through the questioning, but I could feel Travis looking at me like, is this normal? We were standing there surrounded by rubber and steel, pretending it was a regular call. The husband kept talking about how he'd been in wars you don't even know about, waving his arms, careful not to knock over the knives standing like dominoes on the TV stand. I was halfway through telling the wife about shelters if she needed to leave when I noticed a sound from the back hallway, like a low scraping, metal on metal. I paused, looked at Travis, who was fidgeting with his belt. The husband went pale. "What was that?" I asked. "Probably the cat," he said, but it didn't sound like he believed it himself. I walked down that hallway, shining my light, moving past a bedroom stacked floor to ceiling with cardboard boxes, every box marked toys in black marker. I reached the last door, which was shut but not locked. That scraping sound came again, a dragging metal clink across the floor, followed by a muffled thump. "Sir, what's in here?" I asked without turning around. The husband was right behind me, breathing hard. "Nothing, it's storage." I opened the door anyway. The smell hit first, like mildew and something sweet rotting, the smell of wet rubber. The flashlight beam caught piles of those knives, just heaps on the carpet, blades out, mixed with long black and purple silicone dildos. Some had been chewed at the ends, like an animal had been gnawing on them. And then I saw it. In the far corner, behind a stack of boxes, something moved. At first it looked like a pile of dark cloth shifting, but then I saw fingers, long and thin, pale skin stretched tight. They gripped a machete by the blade, pulling it slowly across the floor. The hand was too thin, almost skeletal, but it moved like it had strength. I backed up, hand on my holster, yelling, "Sheriff's office, come out where we can see you." No one answered. The fingers kept pulling the blade, scraping it against another pile of knives, making that metallic chime. The husband started whispering, "Don't look at it, don't look at it, don't look at it," rocking in place, tears rolling down his face. Travis had his gun out now, aimed at the pile. "Is someone in there?" The fingers let go of the blade, and I saw the hand slide back into the shadows, too fast, bending in a way no wrist should bend, popping sounds with every joint. Then from that dark corner, a head lifted. It wasn't a face I could describe right. It was pale, grayish, with dark hollows where eyes should have been, a mouth hanging open wider than it should. The gums were black, and the inside of the mouth looked dry, cracked. It didn't blink. It didn't scream. It just opened that mouth and stared at us, the neck shaking like it was about to snap. The wife started screaming from the living room, "Don't let it out! Don't let it out!" I yelled at the husband, "Who is that? Who the hell is that?" The thing in the corner made a noise, a wet hiss, like it was sucking air through mud. It started crawling forward, hands pulling it across the knives, cutting itself open. But it didn't bleed. It didn't even flinch, just kept dragging closer, that mouth opening wider until it was just a dark hole. Travis fired. The shot was deafening in that tiny room, echoing off metal and walls. I didn't even see what the bullet hit. The husband lunged at me, grabbed my vest, screaming, "It's Christmas! It's Christmas! It comes out on Christmas!" I shoved him off, pulled Travis back, and slammed the door shut. The scraping stopped. Everything went silent except for the wife sobbing in the living room. We called for backup, cleared the house, but when we went back into that room, it was empty. No sign of anyone. The knives were there, the dildos were there, but the corner was empty, just dust and a few dark smears on the carpet. We searched the property, the crawl space, the yard, nothing. The husband and wife wouldn't say another word about it. No charges, no injuries, no follow-up. We cleared the call, logged it, went back to the station. Travis couldn't stop shaking, said he saw its eyes blink right before he fired, but I never saw it blink. I still think about that Christmas Eve sometimes, standing in that room full of knives and rubber, the smell, the scraping sound, and that mouth opening wider and wider in the dark. I don't know what we saw. I don't know if it was human, if it was alive, or if it was ever there at all. Story 10. I never thought I'd be telling this, but I'm a deputy in a small county near Boise, and it happened about 5 years back. It was just after midnight, one of those clear, bitterly cold nights, the kind that makes everything feel sharper than it should. We got a call for a domestic between a brother and sister at a single wide out on the edge of some farmland, maybe 10 minutes from town. Nothing unusual. We get family fights all the time. Dispatch said the sister was saying her brother hit her. He was yelling in the background, she was crying, but there was no mention of weapons. So I rolled up thinking it'd be the usual. Separate them, photos of scratches, maybe someone leaves for the night. I remember the porch light was flickering, and there was this damp, moldy smell when the sister opened the door. She looked tired, eyes puffy, cheap bathrobe pulled tight. She said, "He's in the back room," and stepped aside. I could already hear him cussing from the hallway. I found him sitting on the floor in his boxers, back against the wall, breathing hard like a dog. He had pepper spray all over him, and the air was so sharp it burned my nostrils before I even got near. I cuffed him without much fight, and he kept mumbling, "It's in my eyes, it's in my eyes." I asked her what happened, and she said, "He ripped off my hair," showing me this fake braid she had. Then she said she hit him with pepper spray, the gel kind. I dealt with that before. Sticks to skin, burns like hell. But that wasn't what made it weird. I had to take photos for the report, so I walked down to his room. The pepper gel smell was so strong it made my eyes water instantly, and I had to step back, blink, and take a breath before I could go in again. My flashlight hit the walls, and that's when I froze. There were these dark, brownish smears on the walls, like handprints, but not normal handprints. They were too long, too thin, and the fingers dragged down the wall in lines. At first I thought he'd been wiping his face on the wall, but the shapes were wrong. They were all over, from the door to the window, around the light switch, down near the baseboards, even on the ceiling. I turned around, shining my light, trying to figure out how the hell he got the pepper gel up there. I thought maybe he threw his hands up in pain and smeared it, but there were dozens of these prints layered and overlapping, like someone was crawling along the walls over and over. I could hear him yelling from the living room, "I didn't do it, man, I didn't do it." Over and over, his sister was crying quietly, saying she just wanted him out, saying she didn't know what was wrong with him. I kept taking photos, eyes burning, trying to stay professional, but something about the room felt wrong. The worst part was when I knelt down to get a close-up of a handprint near the outlet. I noticed it had 6 fingers. I counted them twice. 6. Long, thin fingers, like sticks, with the thumb bent at an unnatural angle. I felt this cold pressure on the back of my neck, like when you stand near an open freezer, and I just wanted to get out of that room. I stepped back, and that's when I heard it. It was like something wet dragging across the ceiling. I looked up and saw one of those brown smears slowly stretch, like it was fresh, like it was dripping, even though the pepper gel should have dried by then. It made a slow, creaking noise, like a footstep, but from above. I backed out, closed the door, and stood in the hallway, catching my breath, eyes watering, nose running. The sister was at the end of the hall watching me. She said, "You saw it, didn't you?" I didn't answer. I just told her to sit down while I called for a unit to transport her brother. When I went back to grab the last few photos, the smears were still there, but they looked different, like they'd moved. They were lower now, clustered around the closet door, which was slightly open. I don't know why, but I felt like if I opened that closet, I'd see something looking back at me. I didn't open it. I backed out, shut the door, and told dispatch we were clear for transport. The other deputy showed up, and I told him to grab the brother while I finished the report in the car, eyes still stinging. I didn't tell him about the prints. I just wanted to leave. A week later, I checked the case file. The brother was out, no charges pressed, and the sister had moved out, left town. The landlord found the trailer abandoned, food rotting in the fridge, furniture left behind. The report said there was damage to the walls from pepper spray, and that was it. I don't know what was in that room that night. I don't know why there were 6-fingered handprints on the ceiling, or why they moved when I looked away. Maybe it was something the brother brought in. Maybe it was already there. Or maybe the pepper gel made it visible for a while. All I know is that I've cleared houses after overdoses, suicides, shootings, and meth labs, and none of them ever made me feel the way I felt in that room.